Good evening, everyone. We're truly glad to have you back with us tonight. If you dare to click on this video, we promise you won't regret it. Tonight, we have two real-life encounters from officers who faced the unexplainable while on duty. Stories that don't just send a chill down your spine, they stay with you. If you enjoy quiet tension, long shadows, and that creeping dread that something is just off, then hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a single video. Now settle in, turn off the lights, and get ready to hear what some officers wish they could forget. You're watching Sleep Horror Stories. Good evening. My name is Alejandra, and I'm a police officer in a small town in northern Arizona. I've been on the force for many years, and when I first got transferred to the station where I currently work, I experienced a few strange things. One of them involved a specific patrol vehicle. I joined the force around mid-2010. Back then, there was a popular story circulating around the station, a rumor about a particular patrol car, unit number 0314. Honestly, I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't want to let it get in my head. Street patrol officers don't get to choose which cruiser they'll be driving during their shift, and they don't get to pick the sector they'll be assigned to either. So if Unit 0314 really had something weird about it, I didn't want to know, because I knew that sooner or later I was going to have to use it. It wasn't a question of if it would happen, it was a question of when. I did everything I could to avoid learning more. I stayed away from those conversations, to the point where some of the other officers started saying I was afraid of ghosts. The short answer is, no, I'm not. The longer answer is, I'm not. But if I can avoid being nervous during patrol, that's way better. And there was no way I could stay calm if I had to spend the entire night checking my rearview mirror. The day finally came. My shift started at 10 p.m. and would go on until about 9 in the morning. I grabbed a large coffee and headed to the station. My partner that night was a really friendly guy. I'll call him Brian Walker. We checked in together, and the sergeant pointed us to a sector on the east side of town and then handed me the keys. I try not to look, try not to hear the number, try not to think about the stories. But the moment the sergeant looked at me and said, Unit 0314, I felt my ears burning and my hands turning cold. Brian scoffed and said, "That one. You'd rather patrol on foot, Walker? Get out of here," the sergeant snapped. "That unit's fine." She clearly knew the rumors and thought they were all nonsense. And maybe they were. I convinced myself that it was just silly superstition, just a car that had been through a lot. Nothing supernatural. I walked to the lot calmly. Brian caught up and said, "Of course I don't want to go on foot, but you know what it's like carrying him all day." I didn't want to continue the conversation. When he said, "Carry him," I figured he meant the cruiser. I let it go. Unfortunately, Brian has one very annoying habit. Even now, he can't do an entire shift in silence. When we saw the cruiser parked at the far end, I thought it looked like any other car. But Brian muttered, "Well, at least he's not at the window." I was getting irritated. When we got in the cruiser and Brian sighed loudly, I snapped. I asked with some choice words if he was going to be like that all night. He apologized, but said last time he was in that car, he had a very bad night. Curiosity got the better of me. While we were driving, I asked what he meant. That's when he realized I had never heard the full story. He asked if I was sure I wanted to know. I laughed and told him to go ahead. I didn't care anymore. Looking back, I think he only asked so he could avoid telling the story inside that very cruiser. According to the legend, it all started when that batch of patrol vehicles arrived, around 2001. Officers were excited about the new units. One of them made the big mistake of testing the speed on an empty highway. He lost control, crashed. His partner survived, but he didn't. And that was just the beginning. The cruiser was repaired and sent back into circulation a few months later. After that, it was involved in 4 separate shootouts. That's an insanely high number for a patrol car. Its body was repaired more times than some of the oldest cars in the fleet. But if it were all just coincidence, I wouldn't even be telling this story. As Brian kept talking, I stared at the dark road ahead, and I felt something shift in the back seat. Just slightly, but enough to make me think someone had just sat behind me. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Brian didn't notice anything, so I assumed I imagined it. He went on. One of those shootouts happened during a prisoner transport. 2 gang members tried to rescue their buddy, the guy in custody. They were high, irrational. They opened fire on the cruiser. But in the chaos, one of them shot their own guy, a bullet straight to his head. The other 2 were killed on sight when they resisted arrest. I felt a tight knot in my stomach. Brian said, "Ever since then, people say the gang member's spirit is stuck in this cruiser. That's why I hate being here. You can feel him, sitting back there, breathing. Some officers even heard him banging his head on the cage. One time I saw him, pale, but bullet wound. He looked furious. It's no wonder everyone hates this car." I swallowed and tensed up because now that presence I had felt made perfect sense. I felt it before he told me the story. It wasn't just suggestion. It wasn't in my head. I didn't want to look in the mirror. What if I saw him? I stayed calm, told Brian and myself that I didn't believe in any of this. We worked the whole night, and I kept pretending I didn't hear anything or feel anything from the back seat. It was impossible. There were tiny shifts, sounds, things that wouldn't stand out under normal circumstances. But in that moment, they sounded like explosions. Brian was just as tense. And I had to admit, he was right. This car was horrible. At around 3 a.m., we responded to a domestic disturbance. We arrested a drunk guy who tried to break into his ex's house. As we loaded him into the cruiser, he said, "You're really going to put me in here with that ugly guy?" Brian and I exchanged glances. We looked inside, but there was no one. Or at least, no one we could see. The guy was too drunk to even realize what he said. He passed out as we started driving to the station. I kept an eye on him in the mirror, just in case he vomited or something. And that's when I saw it. Exactly as Brian described, glaring at the drunk man sleeping against the window. It took everything I had not to swerve. Brian asked what was wrong, and I whispered, "I saw him." We arrived quickly, put the drunk in the holding cell. Nothing else happened that night. But I finally understood the reputation of Patrol Unit 0314. It was removed from service a few years ago, and I'm truly grateful for that. Every time I had to drive it, I could feel him back there. Breathing, angry, blaming the officers for his death. I don't know what happens to old patrol vehicles, but if they sold it for civilian use, I hope no one ever has to share a ride with that thing in the back seat. My name is Jason Morales, and I'm a deputy sheriff in a small town just outside of Tucson, Arizona. My job isn't easy. A lot of times, bad people come out to isolated places like this to do shady things or to get rid of something. That's why my partner, his name's Mark, and I are always alert when we're patrolling the back roads. One night in September, back when Mark and I had just started working together, we were driving down a poorly lit desert road outside a little place called Copper Ridge. It was around 10 p.m. We hadn't received any calls, and everything seemed quiet. The sky was clear, and the full moon made everything shine silver. For those who've never been to Arizona, let me tell you, it's dry country. Cactus everywhere. Flat, open space for miles. We were listening to scary stories on the radio and talking about some weird experiences we'd heard from other officers. And yeah, I believe the saying is true. When you talk about these things, you invite them in. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something or someone crouching near the edge of the road. It only lasted a second, but my foot hit the brake hard and I pulled over. Mark asked what I saw. I told him I thought a man was hiding behind the brush. I don't know why it shook me so much, why I made my chest tighten like that, but it did. I grabbed the flashlight, though the moonlight was enough to see clearly. Mark followed me, and sure enough, we saw him again about 100 yards out. That surprised me. From the time I hit the brakes to when we got out of the truck, 10 seconds, maybe. He would have had to move fast to get that far. We called out to him, no response. He kept walking deeper into the desert. Mark and I looked at each other, unsure, but we decided to follow him just to make sure he was okay, or at least find out what the hell he was doing. We picked up the pace, but no matter how fast we moved, he kept his distance. He looked like he was walking casually, but we could never quite catch up. We kept yelling for him to stop. Nothing. After a few minutes, Mark grabbed my shoulder. He was out of breath. "Man, let him go. We're never going to catch him," he said. I wasn't sure what to make of that. The guy had finally stopped, standing still ahead of us. So I asked Mark if he thought this was some kind of joke. I was starting to get nervous. But Mark touched my shoulder again and told me to look to the left. There, half covered by dry bushes and sand, was a roadside memorial. You know the kind. Candles, a cross, old photos. I brushed off some dirt. The plaque was almost unreadable. It was for a man who had died in a car accident years ago. The site was abandoned, forgotten. I remember wondering why someone would put it so far from the actual road. But maybe there was a reason we weren't meant to understand. "Let's go," Mark said more firmly this time. And this time I listened. We turned back toward the truck. But before we got in, I looked back at the brush. And I saw him again, standing right where the altar had been. And then, slowly, he faded out. I felt sorry for him. But there was nothing we could do, so we left. Sorry if this wasn't the scariest story you've ever heard, but it was one of the most real experiences I've had out here. And the most important thing is, I didn't go through it alone. Mark saw him too. Later, I came back to the spot. I cleaned up the memorial and left some flowers. We've driven by that stretch of road many times since. We always look, always hope to see him. But he's never shown himself again. I've asked some of the locals if they've ever seen anything like it. They say they haven't. A few mentioned feeling a chill on their backs, or a weird sense of anxiety in that area, but no one's ever seen him. I guess somehow, we caught his attention that night. Maybe it was the ghost stories. Maybe it was just the right time. But whatever it was, he let us see him.